Good evening if you're joining us from the UK, and good afternoon if you're joining us from LA and New York. This is Transatlantic Conversation. My name is Mia Bays and I run Bird's Eye View, and we are a pathfinder for films by women. We have been cultural activists since 2003, and we are, just for those who don't know us, we are named after a camera position. Bird's Eye View is a camera position, but it's also slang. Bird is slang for woman in the UK. For those of you who don't know, and so basically, we have been since 2003 investing in the releases of films that are directed, or in this case, co-directed by women, written by women, or based on a book or a story by a woman. We are a charity, and our mission since 2018 has been called Reclaim the Frame. That's the name for our audience-facing mission, which is why you can see the branding. And we are delighted to be doing this special collaboration between ourselves, Dogworth, who are the distributor of On the Record, and Beam Underneath from Caramel Film Club. So I'd like to welcome Kirby, Amy, and Drew, the creators and directors of On the Record and the lead protagonist of On the Record. And before we get into that conversation, I'll do a proper intro, I guess shortly. I would like to pass to Bea to just contextualise who she is and what she does. Bea.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bea Manzini, really pleased to be here for this vital and important documentary. Lovely to see you, Drew and Kirby and Amy. I run Caramel Film Club, and we spotlight films with Black stories, Black directors, Black creatives. So it was really important for us to support this film.
Thank you. For having me.
So welcome to Kirby and Amy, who are two-time Emmy Award winning and two-time Academy Award nominated filmmakers behind films such as The Invisible War and The Hunting Ground. And welcome to Drew Dixon, former VP of A&R at Arista and Def Jam, producing hit records such as Maria Maria from Santana, A Rose is Still a Rose, which is one of my absolute favourites, Drew. I mean, still play that all the time. And Whitney, My Love Is Your Love, amongst many others, and one of the main protagonists of the film On the Record. For those of you who haven't seen the film, for those of you who haven't, you've got to watch it immediately after this. But for those of you who are joining us from the 15 cities around the UK that we work in, welcome. We work usually with cinemas, so not often we would be having this conversation with cinemas, but obviously everything is closed at the moment. So let's start by getting into this, where this film actually came from, because Drew and Kirby and Amy, actually, to start, you're obviously filming before this story breaks publicly, so you obviously got in very early. So how did it come about, and how did you decide that you could tell this story?
Kirby, do you want to take it? You want me
Amy,
to?
you want to take this?
Okay. To make a very long story short, we actually were working on a different project. Someone connected us fortuitously to Drew. I spoke to Drew on the phone, and she said, look, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't even know if I want to talk to anybody, but this is my story. We had a long conversation, and I said, well, I'm coming to New York anyways. I'm filming this larger project, and if you feel comfortable and safe, let's just meet, and we'll turn the camera on if you're up for it, and don't sign a release, and we'll go from there. And I don't want in any way, we don't want in any way to influence or affect your journey. Your path is your path, and no harm, no foul, if whatever you decide. And that was the truth. I mean, we've done, as you mentioned in our bios, films in this space. We really honor the sacredness of protecting survivors and not doing any more harm. They've been through enough. So, it was really a legitimate offer I gave her, and a sincere offer. And she showed up, and it was a day we had like 5 interviews scheduled. And I think she was midday. And I remember afterwards, taking the temperature of the room and asking the crew how they felt. And 3 were in tears. And I called Kirby and I said, this woman is incredible, and her story's mind-blowing. And I don't know if we have the privilege of following her, but let's just all stay in touch. And that's kind of in a nutshell how it started. So for those that haven't seen the film, and for those that just saw it, you really are watching in real time Drew's journey as she struggled with kind of trying to figure out, is it her place to speak, and what would it mean if she spoke? And then you not only watch her come to grapple with that decision, but also grapple with the aftermath of what what happens in the wake of what she decides. So we thought, we're so grateful to Drew, A, for trusting us and giving us this opportunity, and B, for allowing everyone to sort of really share and experience and empathize with this journey in a way that I don't think anyone else has seen yet on film. It's a different chapter of Me Too that has yet been explored.
Thank you. Over to you, B.
I wanted to ask a question around safeguarding, actually. I must say, Drew, I absolutely fell in love with you. It was just, the film was so visceral, you were so authentic, and you were so open. And I think even just flashing it back now, I'm quite emotional thinking about it. But the moment for me when you talked about, I don't want to be a victim, I want to be a warrior, you know, and that, I need that on a t-shirt, I need that on my wall, I need that everywhere in life. But I guess I was also in that space very protected of you and thinking about, you know, the team and this subject being so challenging. How did the team safeguard? So this is a question to all of you. How did you safeguard everyone, Drew in particular? And Drew, what was your self-care process like during this?
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm grateful that the film resonated with you, and I feel very lucky as a survivor to even be seen and heard in this way. As terrifying as this has been, I do feel very fortunate. Self-care is probably the area about which I'm maybe the least confident in terms of speaking. I'm still working on that, to be honest with you. I have seen a therapist who I started working with early in the sort of Me Too journey, and she's been wonderful. She's a Black woman with an expertise in trauma, and I see her twice a week virtually now, and that's really been a saving grace. And she's helped me find resources sort of within myself, especially given the kind of isolation of the pandemic. This film came out during the pandemic and 2 days after George Floyd was murdered. So I've been going through this alone. And so I've been really working on finding resources within myself. And, hopefully I'm just trying to get up every single day and get through the day and hopefully, add some value and do something worthwhile in each day. So that's kind of the extent of my self-care perspective.
Thank you. And same question to Amy and Kirby. What were your processes in terms of holding the production together and the cast that were involved and yourselves?
I'm going to let Amy take this. I'm having technical problems.
Okay. Well, to be brief, I mean, obviously one thing we've done work in this space before, and we're survivor first and survivor forward. So it's to create very safe spaces, even in the act of filming, like everything's meticulously thought through. So as few people in the room as possible, always checking in with the person you're speaking with to make sure they're okay, letting them know that they have the power to stop the interview, to take a break, to just say they're not going to do it anymore, which Drew took us up on more than one occasion. We just sort of, oh, you look sad, Drew. Are you sad?
Oh, no, not at all.
Oh, just sort of always sort of, it's a very tactile process. It's not, we're in it together and we're reading the temperature, the emotional temperature, and always gauging the safety and health and mental health of whoever we're working with, all the people in it. So that was something we really were attentive to throughout, from, keeping a closed set, etc., and mostly a female set when and if we could, which was really important. The second thing I want to answer, which is something you asked early on, which I think people will be interested in, you said, who has the right to tell these stories? And I'd love Drew to eloquently talk about how we did grapple with, as a white filmmaking team, what our place was, and we addressed that. I mean, as I said, we were working on a different project. We stumbled onto Drew's story, and then we only felt safe going forward. We started working with the material, but really only felt safe going forward in public once we'd attached, a Black team, to sort of executive produce and give us notes, etc. So I do want everyone to know that, yes, it's very much, a white film by white filmmakers, but it also was shot through and through with absolute, continual notes, checking in, collaboration, full collaboration with a biracial team that really, it wouldn't be what it is. Every frame of it reflects that. And last thing I'll say is that also what was important to us was to make sure that we were just sort of holding a space for these voices to speak. And really what I think people respond to, and you, B, were saying you respond to, is you really feel a closeness and an intimacy with these women. And it's their voices that we're just giving a space to be amplified in. And that was important to us as filmmakers to do, to provide just a holding space and let the voices shine.
You know, Amy, when Amy says that she gave me sort of an escape hatch, she really isn't exaggerating. I didn't sign the release for a year and a half. They started filming me and they told me that I didn't have to sign the release until I was totally comfortable. And this is before I even decided to go on the record in the New York Times. And then the idea of continuing with the film, you know, was something that terrified me, to be honest with you, to sort of amplify the exposure for myself personally. And so there were times when they had a cinematographer headed to my apartment and I said, you know what, I need you to cancel. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to keep going. I kind of want to just get my life back. And, you know, they would honor that. And there were times when I frankly tried to like scare them off. You know, I mean, I was really afraid. I didn't know who to trust. And I even, you know, lash out at them at times, like just literally go away. And you know, they went away and then they would sort of, you know, we would stay in touch. You know, Amy maybe would send me a really great article by, you know, Shanita Hubbard or something else that was really interesting and relevant. And we kind of just kept the rapport going until I eventually said, okay, you guys can film again. And we did that dance for a year and a half before I really felt comfortable enough to sign the release. So they really walk the walk and talk the talk in terms of giving me the agency and establishing trust with me. And their track record working with survivors in the Hunting Ground and the Invisible War really showed, because they knew what they were looking at in terms of my sort of trauma response in a way that I don't even know at the time that I was aware of what I was responding to. And they hung in there with me and they didn't let me scare them off, even though I really tried. So I'm really grateful for that.
And Kirby and Amy, can you talk about how a topic like this affects your creative directorial choices and how you both film and also how you edit?
Well, yeah, we've made a number of films on the subject, and when we film and do an interview with a survivor, you know, we're always very mindful of how difficult or oftentimes challenging a step it is for them to speak about what happened to them and then speak about what happened to them in front of a camera. And Amy does the interviews, and she's just she's really excellent at setting a space that's a very safe space. And we really let them know that they can talk about whatever they want to. If there's things they don't want to talk about, they don't have to, they can start and stop. And, you know, we try to make it so that it is as positive experience as possible. It's often very traumatic, but what we've heard from, you know, people that we've interviewed, we've interviewed hundreds of survivors, is that almost always, even though it can be very difficult, it's also a very rewarding experience for them to be able to be talking to filmmakers, to people who believe them and who are very interested in getting their story out. Because oftentimes, you know, they haven't been believed, or they have felt that there's no way for their story to get out.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I just want to say one thing about that, which is that I believed for 22 years that I was keeping myself safe by not telling anyone the story. And I realized when I finally reluctantly told the story publicly that the only person I'd been keeping safe was Russell Simmons, and that I'd actually been keeping myself small in this tiny little circle that I allowed myself to live in as a victim, essentially re-victimizing myself and really as an accessory after the fact to his crime by becoming an accomplice in the cover-up effectively. And that by stepping outside of the circle, by having the audacity to step outside of this tiny little world that I allowed myself to live in and say, Russell Simmons raped me, L.A. Reid harassed me, and as a result of it, I abandoned my own career and my own power, my own earning power, my own creative sort of outlet. I I took my power back, and I sort of broke the spell in some ways. I thought that by not telling the story, I would make it so that I wasn't a rape victim. But in fact, by telling the story, I'm free of thinking for 1 second any day of my life about being found out as a rape victim. So it's sort of, I'm no longer a rape victim in the way I see myself. So the irony is the world sees me as Drew Dixon, the rape victim. Perhaps they see that when they search my name in Google now. But I don't really care about the Google search results. For me, I don't think about it anymore. So I'm free. So the irony is that saying it out loud is what liberated me from sort of my victimhood. And I never would have expected that in a million years.
Bea, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on what you were saying, Drew, and it's been interesting talking about this film and then singing all of the songs that you collaborated on, made happen, right? Because that's usually my introduction. I sing very badly, so I'm not going to do it now to this audience. But you know that the gift of that, and that for so many people, you were, you know, contribute to the soundtracks of their lives. I mean, certainly for me. So I just wanted to make that point, and ask you about the moment you knew you had to be part of this film, because you talked about a year and a half until you signed the release form. And even when you signed the release form, were you 100% sure at that point?
You know, I ultimately signed the release for the same reason that I went on the record in the New York Times. I'd gotten to a point where I realized I couldn't live with the alternative. So it wasn't so much that I was eager to opt into going on the record, or that I was so eager to opt into being the subject of a documentary. Once the choice was in front of me, I couldn't live with myself knowing that I'd taken a different path because I was afraid of putting it on the line in a way that could help somebody else. You know, in the New York Times, I went on the record because there were other women that had already gone on the record about Russell Simmons in the context of stories about the filmmaker Brett Ratner. And Russell called those women liars. And he said that he was sort of an innocent bystander and collateral damage in the Me Too movement, but that he was incapable of violence because he does yoga and is a vegan. And that infuriated me because he was violent with me. Russell physically fought me, physically, brutally fought me while I tried with all of my might to stop him. And I cried and I begged and I said no. And he fought me. He was violent. And he called these women liars. And I couldn't live with that. And I couldn't live with having spent a year and a half of my life working with these filmmakers, knowing that if I said no, if I walked away, this story might not ever get told. And not my story, but for as far as the film is concerned, it was the story of Black women in America and the way that our sexual autonomy was essentially robbed from us, beginning with the Atlantic slave trade in 1619. And we've been trying for 401 years now to get it back. And to know that this really potentially once in a generation opportunity was here for us to be platformed and centered, and for somebody to take this seriously in the way that Amy and Kirby so clearly were. If I said no, if I didn't sign that release, then I would have to live with the fact that I was sort of enabling this pattern of behavior, and I was a part of the problem effectively if I didn't affirmatively opt in to be part of the solution. And so I didn't ever really choose to do it as much as I chose not to not do it, and that's kind of how I've moved forward with this.
And Amy and Kirby, can you talk about how you particularly talk us through the edit and how you mapped out the subjects the other topics that you chose to lift up, and the other actual speakers as well, and at what point you introduced some other voices who weren't just the survivors? Can you just map us through sort of your creative timeline for putting this together?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we were very interested, particularly initially in, obviously when we interviewed Drew, when Amy interviewed Drew, I mean, we knew right away. We knew right away that this, she would, phenomenal, and she would be very powerful in a film. As we shot with her, we actually pulled together a very loose assembly of about. Because at that point, we were starting this, we weren't sure if, the idea of building a film around Drew wasn't really the way we were approaching it. But we had so much amazing material that we put it together. And I mean, I remember my reaction to it was like a novel. I mean, there was so rich, so many layers, and she carried it all the way through. Excuse me, sorry, 1 second. And so at that point, once we decided, that this was a real probable direction, then we wanted to get, all the other survivors that we could get that who'd been assaulted by Russell Simmons, just to give this chorus of voices, because one of the things that does is it really supports the main character and her story. When people start seeing other people coming forward and saying this happened to me as well, I think it just helps to really see that there's no question what happened. And then of course Drew was introducing us. In her interview, she was continually talking about the double bind that Black women face in this whole experience of being a survivor of sexual assault. And she was very, very eloquent at that. And that opened up a whole world for us. And at that point, we started reaching out to other thought leaders, academics who had explored this and been exploring it for 20 years, Black feminists, in which is, it was so vital and so deep and rich. We really wanted that to be a part of the film as well. And I think that's one of the things that we're really happy with this film, is that dialogue that happens between Drew and the survivors, and then these academics and thought leaders. It kind of, you're on this double register all the way through. And but again, I have to say, I mean, it was Drew who took us in, and the other Silai and Sherry as well, who took us in, because obviously, all Black women survivors have experienced this.
Wonderful, thank you. Over to B.
Off the back of that, I'm wondering, in terms of the cast, and I guess this is a question for Amy and Kirby, in terms of the cast, was there anybody who ended up not being in the film, who had been shot, for example, or in terms of the editing process, were there any scenes? Because in many ways, it kind of seems like a perfect film and there's so much richness in it. But in terms of the editing process, I guess I'm curious, how many hours of footage did you amass? And was there anything that you really kind of was like, I'm killing my darling here, but this is what's necessary for the film?
Yeah. In fact, there's a line in it that's not in it that was probably my favorite line. I shouldn't say that to people not watching it, though. I hate that question. But yeah, there was a beautiful line where Drew talks about the ubiquity of sexism in the industry, and that she couldn't even see it. She couldn't even see it as a teenager, and not to her own fault. She said, just because it was so normalized. She said, like, I didn't notice it. Who notices the air? And that line always gave me chills. And unfortunately, I can't even remember what sequence of events led us to just not have room for it. But anyways, maybe we should, the sequel. We'll put that in. But the other thing is, yes, there was one incredible interview where the person just decided she did not feel comfortable. And that I totally understand, totally breaks my heart. It was, and a lot of people really wanted us to keep it in, and it just, didn't. And I must say that, one of the things we do is, for people that are vulnerable, we let them watch, and, they can decide at the last minute, which is always risky. And but we are so grateful that, everybody else felt safe and comfortable and okay coming forward. It's really hard. I said in a different interview earlier today about how Drew made me reflect on, this dance, this tug of war of her fear, and our being really sensitive to that and really compassionate about that. And I was thinking, because when you're a victim of a crime, you lose control of your autonomy. And then, you're approached by filmmakers and you're asked to, again, lose control of your narrative, and not know who's spinning it and how, And so I think it was really, it's something for, everyone, filmmakers watching this, to just be very vigilant about that sensitivity and that care you bring when you deal with people who have suffered trauma, that's your responsibility to not add more to their pain or inflict more pain. And then the last thing I'll say about the filmmaking process, just to amplify what Kirby said, was yes, it was really important to have these incredibly intense stories. And we were grateful to have the thriller aspect of following will Drew ask or not. Like, that's a gift to a filmmaker to have actually a driving plot point where you have something to hang it on, and an active narrative point in a documentary, but also at the same time to buttress all this chorus of survivor voices with this chorus of these powerful, brilliant women who have for decades thought through what it is to be a Black woman in this world, thought through what it is to be a trauma survivor, thought through intersectionality and hip hop and misogyny and racism and patriarchal oppression. And so we also get to imbue you as you're cathected onto Drew and so engaged with her, you're getting this nourishment, this intellectual, mainlining this intellectual, amazing brilliance. And, that combination, I think, is what makes the film so powerful.
Yeah, great. Kirby, have you got anything to add?
I just want to say that, for our documentaries, there's just a real collaborative process between us as filmmakers and film subjects, because, just like, film subjects have are not clear, a film subject's often never been in a documentary before. So it's a brand new experience and it's a big step. But we also like to approach our films in that way too, is not know exactly where it's going to go. So this collaboration with Drew, even though she hadn't fully committed, it's odd, but in some ways that actually added an element of drama in a way on our side, because we were fully committed. We knew we wanted to make this film, and having obstacles is not a bad thing in the filmmaking process. And one of the things that did is help us think through what she was experiencing, help us think how we could build this out, even as she was, she was always really very polite and charming, but sometimes she wouldn't say yes, right? That would happen. But so we continued, we felt like we wanted to make this film, so we continued to make this film in other directions, thinking that the broader we made it, the deeper we made it, the more she would be a part of it. So in some senses, I think your reticence actually made for a better film, both on camera and off.
Kirby's being polite. I sent some pretty angry texts and emails telling them to leave me alone when I was really scared. And, one of the things that actually built trust for me is that, to me, it was really obvious how much race was informing my fear of coming forward, and how much race was informing my fear of then sort of doubling down, having barely been comfortable going on the record in the New York Times with this film that was continuing before, during, and after that experience. And to me, it was just abundantly clear why I wouldn't want my fingerprints on any perceived takedown of a Black male icon, and why I wouldn't want my fingerprints on anything that would exacerbate the myth of the predatory, violent, dangerous Black man, which cost the exonerated five, originally known as the Central Park Five, their liberty for years, these innocent boys, and cost Trayvon Martin his life and Tamir Rice his life. I have a 14-year-old Black son. This is not abstract to me. I'm thinking about, will I make some decision trying to be sort of a feminist that's going to put a target on my son's back? because he's Black and nobody's going to care that Russell Simmons is over here and my son is over there. That's not how racism works. They're not going to do that analysis. They think we all look alike half the time, and I know that. So the fact that they didn't understand how afraid I was is part of where my sort of like anger and fear would kind of boil over. And instead of responding by sort of making me feel guilty or making me feel pressured, they responded with genuine curiosity. They would come back having read some book or some article about the double bind that Black women face and the unique sort of challenge of Black feminism vis-a-vis white feminism that I hadn't even heard of, frankly. And I was sort of learning, it was sort of this very organic feedback loop where I was learning from them, and I was sort of really sort of struck by how genuinely sincere their interest was in exploring how intensely afraid I was as a Black woman, especially. And that's why I eventually signed the release, because I trusted them ultimately with this very delicate, nuanced story. And I think it's reflected in the film that they made. I mean, I think their genuine curiosity and deference for the importance of this story and the sort of poignance of this story and the way they used their privilege as white people and white filmmakers and the resources, the relationships, the access that I will never have in a million years as a Black woman, and most Black filmmakers won't have, frankly. They used that to center us. I mean, I think that's just really a great example of what allyship should look like. And that's really where the trust came from.
I'm so glad you made that point about allyship, Drew, and how important it is for us to use whatever privilege we have in any situation in order to move the discussion forward. Thank you guys so much for making this film. I'm going to exit because I'm going to get ready for another talk, and Drew, I'll see you in a moment for that as well. Yeah. So thank you so much for this phenomenal work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and for your support.
Yes.
So a question to all of you, actually. So I understand at your Sundance World premiere, there were no less than 3 standing ovations, not surprisingly. And I just wanted to ask each of you how about how you prepare for that, and how particularly Amy and Kirby, you help the survivors particularly maintain kind of personal authority around their story in going through that experience, because of course you understand what that experience may be like. Through that will be her first time to go through it. So yeah, can you just talk us through that?
How we prepared for the Sundance experience?
Yeah, and particularly with your subjects, maintaining personal authority around their story and making sure that they felt kind of held and safe. And
well, I'm going to say something that maybe I shouldn't say, but you know, Amy and Kirby, we went to Sundance really in a state of great distress. And you know, Amy and Kirby had been working really hard with me and the other survivors to make preparations for Sundance sort of through the month of December. And all of that was suddenly upended when our executive producer, Oprah Winfrey, exited the project, you know, a week before Sundance. And so, you know, instead of sort of being able to very attentively usher us through this experience, we all found ourselves in a real state of uncertainty. And it was incredibly stressful, to put it mildly. We came to Sundance without a distributor. All of the events that were originally planned for Sundance with Apple had to be canceled and reorganized at the last minute. You know, a panel that was put together had to be suddenly disassembled and reassembled and planned somewhere else with different people. You know, it was absolutely, in some ways, chaotic, and not because of Amy and Kirby or because anything that the film producers did, but we were really undermined in every way imaginable right before Sundance. And so I was already very anxious about this unveiling. And we had to go through it sort of in this very precarious way. And we just sort of hunkered down and formed our own little huddle with each other. It's really the last time we've been able to huddle with each other, because the film came out in the middle of the pandemic, 2 days after George Floyd was murdered. And so we haven't been able to be together since we were physically together at Sundance. And that was really stressful, traumatic. We really kind of were like this phalanx, united, just hoping that the film would be well received. You know, I've never been to a Sundance premiere before or since, so I have nothing to compare it to. And frankly, when we stood there after the film and I looked out at the people who were applauding and standing and crying in many cases, I wondered if those were going to be the only people that ever saw the movie, to be honest with you. I didn't know if this was the end. I didn't know if we would ever get picked up by someone else. So it was tough.
Yeah, I wish I could give you a graceful, eloquent answer about how we rose to the occasion and swept in and protected everyone and prepared for them as peers. But honestly, we were shell-shocked. We were slammed with just dealing with logistics. We had no hotel rooms. This is 10 days out from a festival. We had no idea. We had to be on the phone nonstop, making sure Sundance didn't pull the film, getting sales reps to try and see if we can sell it. The whole universe changed. So unfortunately, we all got kneecapped and blindsided going into Sundance in a way that I've never experienced before. However, what was so amazing, and Drew said she's never been to Sundance and doesn't know what it's like. I've been to Sundance. I will never have an experience like this premiere. We literally, because word had gotten out, about the precariousness and everything that had happened. There were just these ugly New York Times articles. It was slamming Drew, if you can imagine, pre-release, I'm like, what? Like the last thing you'd ever want. So I'm like going into shock because I was protecting her, my baby. And suddenly like, what? We have the last thing I'd ever want is one of my subjects to be attacked in the New York Times before release. So anyways, we all walked in and, there's this whole audience there. And before anyone said a word, before they showed the film, people rose to their feet and were applauding. I mean, it was so crazy. Like we had just felt the love and support, and then the film played and people went insane, absolutely insane. And it, so it was incredible, but we didn't have the preparation we would have liked. And the only thing I'll say, the teachable moment from that is if you watch the film, and those who've watched the film, what played out in real life is the very paradigm we're talking about in the film.
That's the irony. The film talks about the double bind that Black women face coming forward as survivors when their abuser is Black, and most sexual violence is intraracial. So that's overwhelmingly the case. And the backlash that I feared coming forward, that my community would lash out at me, and the way Oprah Winfrey was attacked by Russell Simmons and 50 Cent and members of the Black community and social media and elsewhere is exactly the point of the film. I mean, Oprah Winfrey was targeted by the Black community and called a traitor to the race because she was supporting this film, which is exactly the point of the film. And so I felt terrible watching her take that incoming, but it never occurred to me in a million years that in that context, she would leave the film. And so that was really painful and very terrifying. But I would say the teachable moment for me is that I'd expected to come to Sundance sort of hiding behind Oprah Winfrey as my fairy godmother, and hiding behind Apple as our sort of mighty partner, and sort of let them do the heavy lifting and sort of do the, I'm there, but I'm just going to kind of watch from the sidelines and let this be sort of the Oprah show, let her kind of carry us through. And when she left and Apple left, and it was really just me and Sherry and Salai, the other survivors, and Amy and Kirby, and the other brilliant women in the film holding it down on our own, I discovered that you don't need some mighty person to speak on your behalf. You do need someone to listen to you. You do need to be seen and heard. But you really just need yourself and your truth and your own courage. And I never knew that I was as brave as I was standing there without Oprah Winfrey and finding out that I was enough. And that was really an amazing experience. I would never in a million years have wished it for myself, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone else. But I feel like we all grew from that, and we grew closer as a result of that.
And I want to underline that it's a testament to everybody watching to the courage of Drew Dixon, Eli Abrams, Sherry Sher, Kimberly Crenshaw, Dr. Joe Morgan, everyone who actually showed up at Sundance after that earthquake. I mean, my God, like, I don't know that I would have had the courage, you know, if my benefactor, who's one of the most powerful people in the world, decided that, you know, this was something she didn't feel comfortable coming forward with. So, I mean, we all owe them a debt of just incredible gratitude for their.
Well, I owe Amy Kirby a debt if we're talking about courage, because when this film suddenly found itself out to sea, you know, in rocky water, without a distributor, without Oprah Winfrey as its executive producer, and frankly, with sort of aspersions cast at my credibility in the New York Times, you know, a lot of filmmakers might have abandoned ship. You know, a lot of filmmakers might have said, you know what, this isn't worth it. You know, we have other movies to make. You know, we have a long career ahead of us, and we don't need to go down fighting for this particular movie and these particular survivors. This is just too complicated. This is too controversial. And they didn't do it. They didn't waver for a split second, you know, and I now realize that there was a period of time where they knew that there might be some trouble ahead, and they protected me from that to the best of their ability, literally until she exited. I was totally unaware of how precarious the situation was. So that speaks to their integrity as journalists and their integrity as independent filmmakers. And it's really why independent filmmaking and independent journalism is so important, because sometimes you have to stand up to the status quo and the powers that be and the inside baseball and speak difficult truths to power. And I wouldn't be here talking to you today if Amy and Kirby had buckled, and they didn't. And I'm eternally grateful to them for that.
Wow. Yes, I just got chills down my spine on that point, Drew. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Kirby, obviously, we should wrap, but just finally, it's a happy ending. I mean, it must have been complicated getting the film out this year, or rather in 2020. It's a complicated year to do anything, but maybe there were some virtues as well. So just tell us about that experience before we wrap.
Well, HBO Max stepped up to take the film and stream it, and they've been great, you know, all the way through the process, but especially at the beginning, as you know, Amy and Drew were talking about. Powerful people have a lot of influence in the industry, and we knew that there was pressure being applied, but HBO Max really wanted the film. They saw it at the premiere. They wanted it right from the beginning, and the executives there have been very, very supportive of it, and very supportive of getting it out as widely as possible, in addition to on its own, on its platform. So that has been a fantastic experience.
HBO Max has been incredible, I have to say. They've been so survivor focused, so survivor centric. Every single interview, every single panel, they've asked us, me, Sherry, and Salai, if we feel comfortable with the panelists, if we feel comfortable with the material, if we feel comfortable with the venue. And when we haven't, they've changed the venue, or they've changed the panelists, or they've changed the focus of the interview so that we feel comfortable. And I've just been amazed by that. I mean, HBO Max has really been brave, and they've walked the walk and they've talked the talk as well. So I do believe things happen for a reason. HBO Max is really where we should have been, and I'm so happy that's where we are.
Wonderful to hear that. It's an honor to speak to you all, Amy, Kirby, Drew. Thank you so much. And it's an incredible piece of work. Everyone out there, please tell everyone to go see it, and please make sure you watch it as soon as possible. You can watch it via Dogwoof, and it's a huge honor to meet you all. Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Drew. Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.